Thank you very much. I would like to go ahead and order the subcommittee for the Finance and Risk Management Committee for San Diego Community Power.
Director Parent,
Present.
alternate Director Fisher,
Commissioners here.
Chair McCann.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. And if we will go ahead and stand and do the pledge of allegiance. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I wanted to see, Madam Clerk, if there were any items that needed to be withdrawn or added to the agenda.
There are no items to be added, withdrawn, or reordered.
Thank you. And do we have any public comments?
There are no public comments.
Okay, we will now move to the meeting agenda. The first item is the approval of the May 18th meeting minutes. Do I have any discussion on that, or do I have a motion?
Commissioner so moved.
And
I'll second.
we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the approving the meeting minutes for May 18th, please vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Item carries unanimously. Now we'll go ahead and move to the review of the treasurer's report for the period ending April 30th, 2023. Dr. Washington, you're on board.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Eric Washington, Chief Financial Officer, San Diego Community Power. I'm presenting to the Finance and Risk Management Committee. I'm seeking a recommendation for the treasurer's report to be received and filed at the next upcoming board meeting, reporting on the period ending April 30th, 2023. Next slide, please. So overall, looking at our actual results as it compares to the budget, the results year to date through April 2023, net revenue came in at $695 million in net operating revenue, with total expenses $6,446 million, with energy costs representing 90% of the total expenses year to date for the period, landing us with a net position of $48.7 million. So when we look at a comparison of the actual results as it relates to the budget, one thing I'd like to point out is that the revenue came in about 1% under what was budgeted for the period. And I'll get into that in a little more detail when we look at the actual results as it relates to the pro forma or the projections. But essentially, it equates to a timing differential, the time the budget was set, and the timing that we actually ramped on the City of National City and the unincorporated portion of San Diego County. I will point out that the total expenses were about 3% under budget as a result of some cost savings that we actual clawback of collateral that was being held as relates to energy costs, which we were able to pull back during this fiscal period. So that is what is attributing to the 3% under budget on the energy costs. We were able to claw back some of those collateral dollars that are carried as an expense line item in our financial statement. Next slide. So now looking at our actual results as it relates to the pro forma, as it relates to revenue, I want to point out that revenue came in 1% over the pro forma, and that was essentially due to a revision that was made to the pro forma as it related to the enrollment of our most recent 2 member agencies, which concluded in April of the month, for the most part, in the month of April, which is the period that this financial report is reporting. So again, net operating expenses came in lower, actually lower than the projected expenses. So we were able to receive some benefit from that, contributing $10 million over what we budgeted for in terms of our net position. And the graphic, the bar chart essentially provides a depiction of results as they compare to the pro forma. Next slide, please. So in terms of our cash build, our reserve build, and where we fell year to date for this period, contributions to reserve, again, 48.5 million was contributed, where we had budgeted 15 million. And our goal year to date in terms of our reserve bill was 107 million. Our total liquidity year to date through April 30th was 204 million. And I really want to make sure that it's understood that the biggest contributor to that was access or availability that we have on our $150 million line of credit with JP Morgan Chase Bank. As pointed out in the debt quadrant, we had outstanding year to date for the period 37 million. And so the other liabilities, the small sliver that you see in this portion of the slide, is a representation of outstanding payables that we have to some of our member agencies, and also a portion of a long-term lease that we have on our office space that we currently occupy. So in terms of goals and reserve building, this period contributed a sufficient amount of cash that got us 47% to our actual goal year to date for the period. Next slide. This slide, as you may recall, or I'll orient it to those who may not have seen it before, but this is really sort of a trending analysis of our reserve build. Wanted to point out in the month of January, where we landed at about 74 million, and then a significant jump in the month of February. As you'll note, the yellow portion of this bar represents our availability on our outstanding line of credit. And as a reminder, that was around the time frame where we transitioned from River City Bank, which provided a $50 million line of credit, to JP Morgan Chase Bank, where that availability significantly increased as a result of our $150 million line of credit facility that we currently have in place. And lastly, this slide is one of the metrics that we started tracking that really kind of points to our participation rate, said differently, our opt-out performance across our member agencies. And as you can see in this slide, overall, with all member agencies contributing, we're at about 96.1% in terms of participation rates. And that puts us at about a 4% opt-out rate overall, which is relatively strong when compared to some of the other CCAs. Next slide. So, Mr. Chair, that concludes my report for the Treasurer's report. Again, seeking recommendation from the Finance and Risk Management Committee that this item be advanced to the board to receive and file at the upcoming board meeting. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Washington. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments?
We have no hands raised at this time, no public comment.
Okay, great. The board up here, Mr. Parent, we have any questions or comments?
I actually have one question.
Yes.
Dr. Washington, in your slide, and it talks about the reserves, and it shows obviously the line of credit itself, but the significant increase from the end of March to the end of April this year, what attributed to such a large amount of cash being available to us?
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. That's a great question. Thanks for asking it. So for the changes between the month of March year to date and April year to date is really a reflection of our cash build. If we could bring slide 14 back up. So as you'll note, the blue portion of this bar is a reflection of our actual cash reserve build. So year to date, we 48.5 million compared to what was contributed for the month of March. So that's the key contributor to the increase in the total liquidity.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you again for the question.
Thank you. Great question, Councilmember Fisher. This is, the recommendation on this is to receive and file the treasurer's report. So we will go ahead and do that so it can advance to the main board. We will now move then to item number 3, the approval of the fiscal year 23-24 operating budget. Dr. Washington, you're online again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, I'd like to just give a shout out to the finance team, our senior finance manager, Tim Magalan, and our financial analyst, Chris Doe, for really working diligently to put the budget together in conjunction with all of our directors and our executive team, extended community power. So this item, we are recommending from this group, a recommendation to advance our fiscal year 2023-24 operating budget to the board of directors for approval at the upcoming board meeting. So on this slide is essentially a reflection of our history. Over the past 4 years, we've enrolled 4 phases of enrollments, beginning with municipalities, our C&I customers, and ultimately the enrollment of our residential customers. And so you'll see in this slide, I won't go into all of the details, but you can see how we performed over time, from the time we were formed in October 2019 through fiscal year 2023, and what our projections are looking to contribute for fiscal year 2024. Next slide. By way of highlights, again, this will be fiscal year 2024 will be reflective of a full fiscal cycle of enrollment from all 4 phases of our ratepayers. Also, we are looking to continue to grow out our team to serve the customers that we have, nearly 1 million accounts that we are currently serving. So we're looking to add approximately, 23 staff members for this fiscal period as we continue our outreach through community events, sponsorships, and advertising. And also for this fiscal cycle, as previously stated at our previous presentation of the budget, we will roll out our capital investment plan, which will be a document to really point to our programs. Our programs, fiscal tracking, and allocations will be tracked in this document in years to come. Next slide. So where are we in terms of our budget development cycle? So we're just about at the finish line in this month of June. Again, as we advance this proposed budget to our board for approval this month, for implementation beginning July 1st, which marks the first day of our fiscal reporting cycle. So I'd like to do an analysis of the changes, the most recent changes that we've made to the budget in terms of the draft and now to the proposal phase. Next slide, please. So really high level in terms of net revenue, that has not changed from what we presented at our May meeting. And now looking at our June meeting with our top line or our net revenue of $1,292.5 million. That number is net of what we've assumed to be our uncollectibles from our ratepayers, and you'll hear more about that when we present on our delinquency or revised delinquency policy. So essentially, the most significant change in our presentation from May compared to June, which we're presenting now, is in the cost of energy. So essentially, the cost of energy in the projection declined by about 23 million. And that's primarily attributed to contracts that were signed. And now we have more hedged resources than we did during the month of May. And that was one of the key updates in our projection for the month of June. Keeping in mind that we look closely at those projections, and from time to time, those get updated, particularly in the area of cost of energy, as we put more of our resources under contract, as opposed to those that are unhedged, which are subject to market price assumptions. So we lock those contracts in. Typically, those are at fixed costs and historically have been less than the forward curves that inform the unhedged portion of our budget. That being said, all other line items categorically remain pretty much the same between what we analyzed in the month of May compared to the month of June. Next slide, please. And again, this slide is a summary. As I mentioned, our uncollectible accounts, we've increased that assumption from 1% of our gross revenues to 4% of our gross revenues, which gives us, which is believed to be conservative to an extent, but with the ramp on of our residential customers, we wanted to just make sure that there was some resources available so that we could allocate to some of those that may run into challenges with regard to paying their monthly bills, at least the generation portion to San Diego Community Power. Our total expenses budgeted for fiscal 2024 shown in this slide is $1,002 million for the period, with the net position contribution of $291 million overall, which would land us just below our strategic goal target of 180 days cash on hand. Next slide, please. So said differently in terms of our reserve bill, this slide is a representation of that. One noted change to this slide, at our last presentation of the proposed budget, we showed historic years in this pro forma projection as it relates to our reserve bill. For this presentation, it's actually showing the fiscal period that is subject to board approval, and then future periods as it relates to our reserve bill. This slide is a reflection of our personnel build. As you'll recall, in previously I made mention of growth in our team, adding 23 positions to our staff, which would land us at 59 positions for fiscal year 2024. And you can see in this slide how we compare to some of the other community choice aggregators or CCAs with regard to staffing levels. Next slide. So what's next? So we are finalizing our operating budget in our budget book that will be available for review and an attachment to the board package that will be coming forward at our upcoming board meeting, and also the capital investment plan, which will become a living document that shows the continuing funds that are allocated for various programs that we will manage through our programs team. Next slide. So, Mr. Chair, that concludes my presentation of the proposed budget for fiscal year 2024, looking for a recommendation from this entity, the Finance and Risk Management Committee, to advance this item to the board for approval at the upcoming board meeting. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Washington. Madam Clerk, do we have any speakers from the public?
There are no hands raised at this time and no public comment speaker card.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions or comments from the board?
Just had one. Thank you for the presentation, Dr. Washington. The one thing that I was going to ask for the materials that are sent for the board for review, we could have that this supplemental details sheet, if we could do a comparison to the prior year's budget next to it.
Thank you. Councilmember Parent will make that adjustment to the budget.
Thanks. And I do see that there's some comparative things in the staff presentation earlier, but I just wanted to see it for the full detail.
Thank you for that.
Excellent recommendation. Seeing no more comments.
I just have one.
Member Fisher.
Thanks. I appreciate the presentation. I think all of this is absolute budgets, pretty much through those last couple months. And I appreciate the finance team and the hard work you put forward. I did have a question about the marketing outreach and talks about communication consultants. I think it's important to kind of give a little bit broader look at what that's going to be. Because I know that most of the municipalities, again, even from a startup to $1 billion in revenue pretty quickly. And I think most of that is on the, and in item D, it says trust. I think most of the people who have been enrolled have done it with the trust of the elected officials. And so I think it's important to kind of give a little bit broader picture of what that looks like as far as reaching back out to the community. Because, I can tell you from my own experience, we were told that there would be significant savings by being enrolled. And I just want to make sure that the consumers still feel that trust, because I know that there's been a few outliers who have spoken poorly of it because what SDG did earlier last year. So I just think it's important to kind of give a little bit more broad stroke of what that looks like as far as getting feedback from the community. Because I think that in each community, there's opportunities to have one-on-one contact with representatives from the agency and with the community.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Councilmember Fisher. I very much appreciate that. Dr. Washington, I want to thank you, Tim, Chris, and Lucas. You've got a great team, and this really helps us have a strong foundation financially to be able to grow and to do some of the great things that I think we need to do. With that, this is an option to recommend the operating budget to the main board. So I'll go ahead and make the motion and wanted to see if I could get a second.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Item carries unanimously to recommend the board approval of the fiscal year 23-24 operating budget. We will now move to item number 4. And again, you're on, Dr. Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have with me this afternoon Lucas Utah, our Director of Analytics and Account Services, and Lucas will be presenting this item for the Finance Risk Management Committee. Lucas. Thank you, Dr. Washington.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the Finance Risk Management Committee. My name is Lucas Uto, and I'm the Director of Data Analytics and Account Services. Today, I'll be presenting to you all the need for San Diego Community Power's board to approve the remainder of our collections and delinquency policy to also cover residential customers. Just as a way of history, in 2021, the board then approved our collections and delinquency policy, but only covering residential customers, as that was the only customer class that we were serving back then, and instructed staff to review the rich data for residential customers once phase 3 and phase 4 was concluded, and return to the board with recommendations of the policy. So in this presentation, I'll be covering the objectives of having a collections/delinquency policy. I'm actually going to preview the state of arrearages in our region at a high level. I will also dig deeper into the state of San Diego Community Power arrearages. And then lastly, the programs that are available to assist our customers with arrearages. On to the next slide, please. So why do we need to have a collection/delinquency policy? In terms of what this policy allows for us to do is to provide a framework for staff and our back office service provider to better serve our customers, obviously, as customers are our cornerstone, to treat them with respect and dignity, and also to set very clear expectations on the handling of past due customer charges. Also, this policy will allow for us to minimize and mitigate bad debts for the overall long-term financial viability, resiliency, and competitiveness of our organization. Next slide, please. So in terms of what is the state of arrearages in our region? And this slide here is actually data from the California Public Utilities Commission. all of the investor-owned utilities have to report this information. And the information encompasses not only their past due balances, but essentially the total arrearage balances that they carry on their books, including our receivable. And so you can clearly see that from 2018 through 2022, as tracked by this data set, for SDG&E in particular, the state of arrearages has increased year over year from 2020 through 2022. And this trend is actually still being observed 6 months into 2023. On to the next slide, please. So then how does this boil down to the residential customer class? You can clearly see that across all the 3 IOUs in the state, again, through data obtained from the California Public Utilities Commission, that every one of them is seeing an increase in their residential arrearage exposure, obviously for a number of reasons, the latest of which is the natural gas prices blowing out in the winter. And this essentially is what we're seeing on our side as well. So on to the next slide. In terms of the month-over-month changes, so the graph on your left-hand side, that essentially is tracking our arrearage that is aged at 120 days and beyond. And you can clearly see that from January of 2023, when we started tracking this data set, through May of 2023, that the arrearage that are aged 120 days or higher has increased, right? It was 9 million in January, it's now 24 million in May 2023. And then the slide on your right-hand side, that essentially is tracking it based on the commercial and the residential customers. And you can clearly see that month over month from January through May, the commercial arrearages that are 120 days plus has remained relatively flat at $3 million. Whereas for the residential customer class, month over month, we are seeing it was a gradual increase and then obviously a little bit of an exponential increase, which then is the reason why I am here before the committee today to say that we as an organization, we have to consider adopting a policy that allows for us to engage with our residential customers and provide to them all of the available resources out there, which I'll cover in my next slides. So next slide, please. So these are some of the programs that are available to our customers that essentially assist them with their arrearage exposure. We do have the LEHI, or Low Income Home Assistance Program. We have the Arrearage Management Payment Program, and this program essentially allows for residential customers, particularly those that are already participating in the CARE and FAIR programs, to get debt forgiveness up to $8,000. Now, the policy that we have in front of you to advance to the board this month will allow for us to engage with the customers in terms of communication. We're going to send them notifications of their past due being delinquent after 90 days to say, hey, these are all the programs that you qualify for, and we're going to engage the customers with a physical mailer at the first try, as well as electronically via email, if one is available on file. We also have, we participated along with SDG&E in the California Arrearage Payment Program. And I remember, or I recall, Mr. Fisher, you asked this question in January, and we were in the middle of the CAP disbursement, where essentially there was over $2 billion out of the state budget allocated to past due balances. And we worked very closely with SDG&E to ensure that it was close to $100 million came in to San Diego region, and customers did not even have to apply for it. It was automatically applied in January. On to the next slide, please. We also have a program called PIP, or Percentage of Income Payment Plan. And this program allows our customers, particularly those on fixed income, to pay a predetermined affordable percentage of their monthly income through their electricity or natural gas bill. There are also a number of extended payment plans that customers qualify for, where essentially SDG&E takes the past due balance and spreads it over either a 12-month or a 24-month span, just so that the customer can get the requisite resource to know exactly what to expect as far as the bill goes. Obviously, there's the care program that allows for customer to get a discount. And so the essence of us having this policy that extends coverage to residential customers is going to allow for us to engage with the customers, essentially let them know of all these resources that are available, which obviously is a dual benefit to the customer and to us as a community-based organization, right? To essentially meet our financial obligations such that we can exist for the long time to serve these customers accordingly through the long term. So that concludes my presentation for today. And the recommendation or the request to the committee today is to essentially advance this policy to the board in June, just so that we can put the laws in motion to assist our residential customers in our region.
Lucas, thank you very much for the presentation. Madam Clerk, do we have any public speakers?
We do not have any public speakers.
Thank you very much. Members of the board, do we have any questions or comments?
Yeah, I had a question. So I clarify, so we are already doing collections for commercial customers, right?
Correct.
And so this would be for taking the next step forward for residential collections.
Correct.
We have a vendor who does the collections for us for commercial already. And then if we adopt this, will we automatically be using the same vendor, or will there be an RFP process for selecting a different one?
That's an excellent question, Councilmember Parent. The RFP was issued for non-residential customers, but with the knowledge that the residential customers would come in after the board had approved the policy recommendation. And so there will not be a need for us to go back and issue a separate RFP, but we'll definitely need to engage with the vendor, Financial Credit Network, to essentially scope out what it would mean and what the terms would look like for the residential customer class.
Okay, and then if we adopt the policy at our next meeting, what is the timeframe in which we expect residential collections to start beginning?
So the residential collections will not commence immediately. And again, the reason why that is as a function of the pandemic, I would say the bulk of the IOUs did not essentially enforce any of their collections and delinquency policies. There was a moratorium that expired in September of 2021. And then thereafter, as a function of the cut funds disbursements, the IOUs were essentially instructed not to enforce the collections delinquency. But now we have received confirmation from SDG&E that they are resuming their credit engine for residential customers gradually. And they do anticipate that that process will be fully ramped on by around October of this year. And so the policy that we have in front of you is going to allow for us to prepare to be in lockstep with SDG&E. And as you know, SDG&E is our bill processing agent. And so every payment and all the payment plans and all of these programs have to go through them to essentially assist the customers, not only from a transmission and delivery past due perspective, but also from the SDCP past due perspective.
So do we have an estimated time for when that collection process would start to occur for residential customers?
On our side or on SDG&E side?
Well, I guess on the ratepayer side.
On the ratepayer side, from our receivable, it's going to commence 30 days after the board approves.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Oh, wait, I did have another one. Just with it occurred to me, this is the other one I forgot. When we saw the, pretty sharp uptick in accounts that were in arrears. Do we attribute that to one or both of the increase in rates and the reduction in household saving rates that we're seeing nationally, or is there a different explanation?
Well, I think there is a different explanation. So customers throughout the pandemic obviously were behind as a function of the economics during that period, and quite honestly, they haven't gotten a chance to come out of it because this winter, natural gas prices blew up, and essentially customers were exposed to even higher than expected bills. And we are seeing that affordability in terms of the rate increases from the beginning of the year. So it's essentially a function of so many different variables. And in terms of the policy that's before you, we definitely recognize that there is a significant burden on our customers, particularly those that are in the communities of concern. And the policy allows for very specific allowance targeted towards those customers in terms of not only the resources that are available to them that will be communicated as a function of this policy, but also in terms of how we will enforce the collections and the noticing of past due balances. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Member Fisher, Councilmember Fisher.
Yeah, just had a question when it comes to shut off service and procedures. I noticed that it did mention in your presentation about commercial resident or commercial customers who, and I don't know how to phrase this. Does San Diego Community Power become the entity that shuts off power? Do we leave that to SDG&E?
That's an excellent question. So San Diego Community Power does not and cannot shut down service simply because we're not the meter owners. SDG&E is. And so in terms of the enforcement of this policy, right? There is never going to be an instance where SDCP shuts off customers' power. We will essentially revert the account back to SDG&E, and there are very specific CPUC approved rules where then they go through their notification process and the subsequent shut off according to those very specified CPUC approved rules.
And then the second question I have goes back to, assistance that's come down from the state, and you mentioned it earlier, that the $100 million. I would think that in our best interest for our financials, that we would look towards kind of automatic payment. I know that there's processes, there's multiple opportunities and programs that help customers who are unable to meet their financial obligations, but it sure would be nice if we could have it so that it was a little bit more direct. If it's sitting and it's specified for our region, that the people who hold that money would feel a little bit more compelled to pay to the power companies, the entities who provided service, without incurring more expenses of processing requests from the paying customer. So again, I don't know if that's really applicable here, but I think it's a thought process that we should explore as we, for some type of maybe legislation or whatever to go through. Because again, if there's money that's set aside, I think the best way you can use it is to equitably spread it around and help people become a little bit less burdened by some of the debt they've incurred.
Great. Any more questions or comments? Okay. Again, Lucas, I really appreciate you helping implement this, and this is something that we obviously need to be able to do and move forward. With that, I'll make the motion to approve and make the elections delinquency policy for residential customers and submit it to the main board of San Diego Community Power. So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Item carries unanimously. We will now move to committee member announcements or comments. Do we have any committee members who'd like to make an announcement or comments? Nothing. And staff, do we have anything that you'd like to add?
Nothing further to add from staff at this time.
Outstanding. Okay, and then what we will do then is we will now adjourn the subcommittee, and really appreciate everybody being here. And I think these are some really good substantial items that we're going to bring to the full board. Thank you. With that, we will now adjourn. Thank you.
Thank you.